Okay. Ah, juice right from the get-go. That might be a little much if I really start belting it out. Check, 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 check. A little better. All right. Chapter 11, going into Daniel 11, and this is probably one of the most interesting chapters. But remember the context. Daniel chapter 10 is kind of an introduction to this last vision that Daniel has. And in the original text, there's no chapter and verse divisions. And most expositors would say that verse 1 of chapter 11 really kind of goes with the end of chapter 10, okay? So this week we're going to go through some of chapter 11, and I got a schedule out here, and we'll go over that here. So how about if we ask the Lord to bless our time and dive right in? Heavenly Father, thank you for just this beautiful cool morning, and just thank you for the bright sunshine, and it just helps us remember what Daniel saw in chapter 10, that he saw you just in like polished bronze, and your eyes were flames of fire, and every time we look up in the sky we can think about what he saw and what we will see one day. We look forward to that day. We thank you for the way that you've revealed these things to Daniel. Open our ears and our eyes to see all that you would have to say to us today through this vision. And we'll give you the praise and the glory at your coming in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so it kind of starts off here in Daniel 11:1. Remember that the angel that's delivering the vision, get this to sit right on me here. He's still talking. Okay, he's the one that's talking. I think I need a little less juice, even more. It's really coming out, and I'm barely talking, I think. And when I get going, I'll be screaming and yelling, right? Okay, a little better. The angel is speaking. He's the one giving the vision to Daniel, and I think you can make a case that this angel may be Gabriel here. Others would have different views. And he says, in the first year of Darius the Mede, namely this angel, he rose to be an encouragement and a protection for him. And the first question is, who's him? Who's he talking about here? Is it Darius or someone else? Well, naturally, there's two views. Darius is one of them, but the other, there are some expositors that believe that Gabriel is referencing Michael here. Okay, Michael is in kind of the near context here, but really the nearest antecedent for him is Darius, and I think you could probably build a case that either one, but I think Darius is likely. So we'll, but again, does it matter who the him is here? I don't think so, not in the context of the vision and what's being presented here. What does it mean that I arose to be an encouragement and a protection for him? Okay, encouragement, it literally means to fill with courage, or strength of purpose. Okay, how would an angelic being, strengthen or encourage another angelic being? That's kind of one of the reasons I think he's really talking about Darius here, that Gabriel somehow was an encouragement to Darius. And protection, place of safety, kind of the normal thing. How did we get a fly in here? And so somehow the imagery here that Gabriel is saying is that somehow he was involved in protecting and giving Darius encouragement, okay, strength of purpose. And what could that mean? What could that mean? Well, The text doesn't tell us at all what that really means, but we can speculate a little bit as long as we don't, die on that hill. What was happening in these days, like towards the end with the fall of Babylon and the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire? One of the most significant things that was done in the early days of that Medo-Persian Empire is the decree of Cyrus that allowed the Jews to go back home and eventually rebuild Jerusalem. And knowing that in the background we know that there's a spiritual battle going on. We had a little bit of that from last week in Gabriel being prevented by the Prince of Persia from getting to Daniel and needing Michael's help to actually come and give that. We could imagine that perhaps a huge spiritual battle was going on behind the scenes, and Gabriel, somehow, was helping to move Darius and Cyrus to produce that proclamation that let the Jews go back. That's at least a possibility of what this particular passage can mean. Again, speculation, total speculation, but that's at least a possibility. All right, here's a helpful outline when you're looking at the vision of chapter 11 and 12. Right here in verse 2 is going to be kind of the summary of the kings of Medo-Persia. Okay, Daniel is being told what will happen. And then in 3 and 4, you've got the kings of Greece that are coming. And then we have a big span of time that covers verse 5 through 20. Something like 100 and something years after Alexander and during the Greek Empire rule. The conflicts between what the text says, the king of the south and the king of the north, and we'll talk about that. That's what we're going to cover this week, is predominantly 2 through 20, a very high-level overview. Next week, what we plan to do is 21 through 35, and that really highlights the life and times of Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, he was a despicable ruler in the time of the Maccabees in the mid-100s BC. He did all kinds of nasty things, and the text is really focused on that. That's what we'll do next week. December 3rd, I'm preaching in both places, so we won't have Sunday school. When we come back on the 10th, we'll finish the chapter 11 portion that deals with, I think, the Antichrist, the king of the time of the end. That'll be on December 10th. And then we'll wrap it up, the rest of chapter 12, the final words to Daniel. Again, there's some interesting items there about resurrection and what's going to happen. And then finally, on December 31st, December 24th, we're having a combined service here. No Sunday school, just worship service. So we won't have Sunday school then. So on the final Sunday of 2023, on the 31st, I'll put together kind of a summary of all of Daniel that'll springboard us into possibly going into Matthew 24 and Luke 21 and Mark 13, those kinds of things. What the Gospels say about the end times, and how do we properly take what we know from Daniel's visions, how do we properly take that into the Gospels as proper background? That's very important for our understanding of that. So, okay. Now, this section, I want to highlight just for a couple of minutes some of the commentaries that you can get. This summary that I've given for chapter 11, the first 20 verses or so, probably one of the better summaries is from Dr. Showers in his commentary. It's a very good commentary. It's very readable. And in chapter 11, he has just a couple of pages that describe verses 5 through 20, what the historical events were that the prophecy pertains to. So if you want a good, solid understanding and simple overview, this is really probably the best one. Now, if you want to get into a little bit more detail, okay, this commentary by Stephen Miller in the New American Commentary series, which in general is conservative, he has done a good job. There'll be a lot more details in this. Some of the things that I put in the notes, I kind of followed Showers pretty well, but then when there's some detail here that I thought was relevant, I stuck it in the notes here too. So this is a great commentary from the conservative perspective. Another really good commentary from the conservative view is by Walvoord. This is just simply Daniel. This has had a couple of iterations with different titles, but this is the current one. It's just simply called Daniel. It's in the John Walvoord Prophecy Commentaries, and Walvoord himself produced much of this commentary. Again, this is going to have a lot more detail in chapter 11 and many of the other places. And really, how do you pick a commentary on Daniel? I really use two chapters or two items to pick a good commentary on Daniel. One, what does the expositor say about the author of Daniel? Okay, you're gonna, in a couple of pages, you're gonna see whether he holds the Maccabean view, the liberal view, or the conservative view. Okay. I have a couple commentaries from the liberal view. They're okay to have, but they're mostly for research purposes. And then the second thing is, how does it cover the events in chapter 11? How does it view all the historical prophecies that have been fulfilled in 11? How much detail does it go into? I want to talk about, just for a second, this commentary that I just got yesterday. This is a commentary on Daniel. That's the title of it, by Leon Wood. Okay, this has been in print and existence since I think the 70s or so. He passed in the 70s. But the thing that I like about this commentary that's different from the others is he does a commentary on each phrase in every verse, each passage. He literally goes through phrase by phrase, not verse by verse. He goes phrase by phrase and really, opens up a lot of the meaning of the Hebrew and Aramaic words and that kind of stuff. I just did a real quick, flip through, and I really like this commentary. I'm going to use it quite a bit to probably update the notes someday, 10 years from now when I do Daniel again. But this really is a fascinating commentary that I didn't know about until I was just, kind of looking around, seeing some stuff on the internet, and I saw someone made a reference to it. And I was pleasantly surprised that this is a phrase-by-phrase commentary, not just a verse-by-verse. So I think this could be really helpful. So there's some good Christmas ideas. If you want to find some of those, stick that on your Christmas list, and you won't be disappointed at any of those. So this is Leon J. Wood. Leon J. Wood. He, let's see. He was at. Let's see. Let me read the back. He's a professor of Old Testament studies, dean of the Grand Rapids Baptist Seminary. He was educated at Calvin Theological Seminary, which is interesting because everything I've read, he's a dispensationalist. He, with graduate studies in Israel through the New York University, he receives his PhD degree from Michigan State. He authored Elijah, the Prophet of God, Survey of Israel's History, Holy Spirit in the Old Testament, Israel's United Monarchy. So I mean, I'm sure if I read the whole commentary, I'd find some stuff that I disagree with if he was educated at Calvin Seminary, of course. But he's not an amillennialist. That was clear reading just a couple of pages. So I think it's definitely worth looking at for future references. So, all right, let's get into it. Verse 2 says, "And now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings are going to arise in Persia. Then a fourth will gain far more riches than all of them. And as soon as he becomes strong through his riches, he will arouse the whole empire against the realm of Greece." Okay? Now, this really is the start of such incredible historical detailed prophecies here that have been fulfilled in ancient history, and it's unmistakable, really in quite dramatic fashion here. And this really is the reason why liberal scholars have been so adamant on claiming that Daniel was written after the facts in 165 BC. After all of this happened, Daniel was written by someone pretending to be Daniel, pretending to be someone that was alive during Nebuchadnezzar's reign and Cyrus and Darius's reign. And his purpose was just to encourage the Jews to keep fighting against Antiochus Epiphanes in the 160s, okay? It's because all of these events that are prophesied have come true in very specific detail in history, and we're going to see a lot of that as we go on. Walvoord commented that he was able to pick off, or at least he was aware of, 135 separate fulfilled prophecies are contained in Daniel chapter 11, at least up through the first 35 verses. That's truly astounding. That's quite a bit. All right, so 3 more kings arise in Persia. Okay, those kings were these 3 guys. Cambyses the second, there's his years. He was the son of Cyrus the Great. Okay, Pseudo-Smerdis was another son of Cyrus the Great. He was the younger son, so the older one, he came first, and then the younger one came. And then Darius the first, Hypotaspes, called Darius the Great. It's not the Darius of Daniel chapter 6. This is a different Darius. There were, lots of common names there. But those were the 3 kings that arose after Cyrus. And then the fourth one, the fourth one that the text implies would gain wealth has to be Xerxes. Everything that's known historically about Xerxes, he amassed fabulous wealth, and it's interesting that Gabriel goes on to say that he would use those riches to wage war against the Greeks. Okay, and Walvoord, in his commentary, just a couple of sentences, I think, perfectly summarized it, so I quoted it here. Xerxes the first used his great riches in a period of some 4 years to gather a great army amounting to hundreds of thousands, one of the largest armies in the ancient world. And the expedition that he launched in 480 BC against the Greeks was disastrous. Okay, however, and Xerxes never recovered. Okay, so he attacked the Greeks over there, and he got defeated humiliatingly. And after that, there were several Persian kings after Xerxes, but they had no bearing on future events, from his perspective. So some of that is left out, and that's the interesting thing about the prophetic scriptures. And as a general rule, prophecy is accurate, but it's also selective. Okay, not everything that transpired in history during the Persian Empire and the Greek Empire was prophesied and done. Does that mean God didn't know what would happen? Of course not. He just elected not to give that to Daniel for his own purposes. So it's selective. Okay? And part of the selection that we have here is that none of the other Persian kings after Xerxes is really mentioned. And actually, if you skip to the diagram that I built on the last page, you will see that first time chunk with the 3 kings there and Xerxes. I put a big number 1 there as a significant historical event in 480. He launches his attacks on Greece in 480. And then there was 130 years of more Persian kings, but nothing in the scriptures. It goes right to the next verse, to verse 3, a mighty king will arise, okay, and will rule with great authority and do as he pleases. But as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom will be broken up and parceled out towards the 4 points of the compass, though not to his own descendants, nor according to his authority which he wielded, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and given to others beside them. Okay, so between Xerxes in verse 2 and the beginning of verse 3, there's a 130-year gap where there's no prophetic information that's mentioned here. However, the Medo-Persian Empire continued on for that 130 years, and we skip right into the next section here. Okay, now, who was this mighty king? Well, the first king of the Greek Empire was Alexander the Great. Okay, there's the years that he ruled, but he started his military conquest of the known world about 334 BC. He pretty much grabbed most of the territory that you see on the map, but shortly after he conquered all of those lands, he died. He died at a very young age. He was only 32. He was a brilliant military and organizational guy and very powerful, but he died at a very young age. And unfortunately, both of his sons were murdered, so neither one of them, in the years after Alexander's death, assumed the rulership in the kingdom of Greece. Okay, and over time, the 4 of Alexander's generals kind of divided up the empire into 4 different parts. Okay, but really none of these rulers, ever attained the stature that Alexander the Great did. We looked at those 4 generals in chapter 7. They were Ptolemy, who took Egypt, which, sorry for the blurriness of the map, I really got to find the same one, but better. That's the dark orange section where Egypt is located. That's the Ptolemaic kingdom, and it's reference to just Egypt. Seleucus took Syria, Babylon, and much of the old Medo-Persian Empire. That's the green up here, pretty vast territory. Lysimachus took Thrace and Western Asia Minor, over there where Greece proper is, and Cassander ruled Macedonia and Greece proper. So just a couple of other colors there, really of no consequence there. But notice in the map, where is Israel with respect to these kingdoms here? Well, it's drawn on this map. It's part of the Ptolemy section of the Greek Empire. But over the years, and it's documented here in verses 5 through 20, it's going to really highlight the struggle between those 2 kingdoms, those 2 sections of, they didn't get along. The 2 generals and eventually the kings that replaced them for about 150 years. There was warfare, between Egypt and it's called Syria, but it refers to the Seleucus Empire. Syria wasn't a country back then, and Daniel doesn't call it Syria, but we call it Syria just as a reference to it. So Daniel 11, 5 through 20 depicts all of the conflicts that are going on between the two divisions of the empire. And the rulers of these two empires in the text of Daniel 11 are called, at least in 5 through 20, the king of the north and the king of the south. The king of the north is going to be Syria. We'll just make reference to Syria when we're talking about the northern type kingdom. And the king of Egypt, south, will refer to him. Daniel refers to it as the king of the south. Okay? All right, so the kingdom is split. And then it says in Daniel 11:5, the king of the south will grow strong along with one of his princes, who will gain ascendancy over him and obtain dominion, and his dominion will be a great dominion indeed. Okay, so this king of the south, if we look in history, was Ptolemy the First, Soter. Okay, and I'm going to butcher some of these pronunciations. He ruled Egypt and that southern Ptolemaic kingdom from 323 to 285. It was a 38-year reign. And during that same time, Seleucus I, Nicator, there's his years, he was kind of wrapping up and vying for control of his kingdom with a fellow named Antagonius of Babylon. So in there, he was having a hard time kind of controlling his territory there in the northern part of the Greek Empire. And eventually he went on to control the rest of Syria, but he needed an alliance with the southern kingdom, Ptolemy, to defeat this fellow. And he finally did, and he went on to gain control of, finally, again, much of that green area. And it's in that sense he became more powerful than the king of the south there, Ptolemy the First. He was in control of a much wider area. Now, in verse 6, it says, after some years they will form an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north to carry out a peaceful arrangements, but she will not retain her position of power, nor will he remain with his power, but she will be given up along with those who brought her in, and the one who served her, as well as he who supported her in those times. So several years later, there were two new kings that sprang up after the first two, called Ptolemy II. Okay, so the son of Ptolemy the First, and Antiochus II Theos. Okay, those were the next rulers of the north and the south. They decided they didn't want anything to do with their father's warfare and that kind of stuff, so they formed a peace alliance. And many times a peace alliance was formed by giving a daughter to one of the kings, kind of as a dowry gift. Okay, Ptolemy gave his daughter Berenice to Antiochus. Okay, well, unfortunately, Antiochus was already married, and so the one thing that Ptolemy insisted is that Antiochus divorce his wife Laodice and marry Berenice, which he did do. Okay, he did do that. Now, when Ptolemy passed away, whom he had this alliance with, Antiochus abandoned Ptolemy's daughter and went back to his first wife. However, a woman scorned is a horrible thing. Laodice, what she ended up doing, she was so bitter over Antiochus's divorce of her, she had her husband killed, she had Berenice, his wife, killed, she had Berenice's infant son with Antiochus, had him killed, and all the Egyptians that came with Berenice all of them, she had all of those people killed. Okay, bitterness certainly ran deep in that one, but that's what happened in history. Very interesting how well that aligns with the scriptures. All right, on to verse 7. But one of the descendants of her line, namely Berenice, will arise in his place, and he will come against their army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, Syria, and will deal with them and display great strength. Also their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold he will take into captivity to Egypt, and he on his part will refrain from attacking the king of the north for some years. Okay, Berenice's brother, Ptolemy III, down there in the south, he became the new king of Egypt in place of his father, Ptolemy II, who gave Berenice to Antiochus. Ptolemy then marched against Syria in revenge for his sister's murder. Okay, naturally, the king was upset about this. Ptolemy defeated the Syrian army, and he had Laodice put to death. So he killed the wife that did all the assassination before. He took large areas of the Syrian empire, and he returned to Egypt with all the spoils of that war. And basically, for the next 20 years or so, those two nations were at peace. Okay, that's historically what happened that overlays Daniel 11, 7, and 8 beautifully. Okay, on to verse 9. Then the latter will enter the realm of the king of the south, but will return to his own land. And it's essentially, after a bunch of years of peace, a new king of Syria, Seleucus II, he tried to take part of the kingdom from Ptolemy III, but he was unsuccessful. But in verse 10, his sons, Seleucus II's sons, will mobilize and assemble a multitude of great forces, and one of them will keep on coming and overflow and pass through, that he may again wage war up to his very fortress. So after Seleucus II, failed to take back, some Egyptian territory, his sons, and he had two, Seleucus III, okay, and Antiochus III, who was Antiochus the Great, okay. They made conquests of Syrian territory, all the stuff that was captured by Ptolemy III, including the land of Israel here. Okay, so for the first time in a long time, the Syrian kingdom, the northern kingdom, had control of the Holy Land. First time in a long time. Now, the text does say that one of them will keep on coming. That's because Seleucus III was actually killed in Asia Minor in some battles against some Roman legions there. And it was Antiochus the Great that was the one that went on to make these conquests in the land of Egypt here. Okay. All right, Daniel 11 and 12, the king of the south will be enraged and go forth and fight with the king of the north, and the latter will raise a great multitude, but that multitude will be given into the hand of the former, and when the multitude is carried away, his heart will be lifted up, and he will cause tens of thousands to fall, yet he will not prevail. Okay, so now the king of Egypt, he's now Ptolemy IV, Philopator. He became kind of angry at Antiochus III, Antiochus the Great's advances. So he assembled a large army and defeated the forces of Antiochus III at Raphia. Raphia is just south of Israel, and that happened in 217 BC. And according to Polybius, he was a Greek historian at the time. And incidentally, that's why there is so much detailed history during this time period, is because the Greek language had come on the scene, and it was now possible for historians to accurately write down history. So this is why we know so much about these times and how it overlays the the text of Daniel 11 here so accurately. This Greek historian said Antiochus lost 10,000 soldiers and another 4,000 were captured. But more importantly, Israel now went back to Egyptian control in the south, okay? All right, now we have a larger section in 13 through 16. It says, "For the king of the north will again raise a greater multitude than the former, and after an interval of some years, he will press on with a great army and much equipment. Now in those times, many will rise up against the king of the south," okay, Egypt, "the violent ones among your people." That's a very key piece. Who's your people? It's talking to Daniel, so your people would be Jews, okay? "Rise up among some violent ones among your people will also lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they will fall down. Then the king of the north will come, cast up a siege ramp, and capture a well-fortified city, and the forces of the south will not stand their ground, not even their choicest troops, for there will be no strength to make a stand. But he who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will be able to withstand him. He will also stay for a time in the beautiful land with destruction in his hand," okay? All right, in 203 BC, and we're getting to that final second historical event, number 2 box in 197. In 203, Ptolemy IV died. Okay, he was, again, king of the south, Ptolemy. He died, and his son, Ptolemy V, he became king, but Ptolemy V was only 4 years old at the time, okay? That presented a little bit of problem. Antiochus the Great up there in the north, he said, wow, perfect time to go attack. We got a 4-year-old king. They'll probably be disoriented and disorganized. You'll have military men in charge of the country. Antiochus thought, hey, this is a perfect time to go and grab all of our land back, okay? He didn't do this alone, okay? He made an alliance with Philip of Macedonia, potentially other Greeks over there, Egyptian rebels that opposed Ptolemy IV or the fifth as an infant king. They were just opposed to being ruled by an infant king and satraps that probably were doing all the ruling. So there were some Egyptian rebels and some Jews there, okay? These are, what does the text say? Violent ones among your people. There were some disgruntled Jews at the time that believed that Antiochus would benefit the nation of Israel way more than the southern kings. So they aligned with Antiochus. So Antiochus' forces defeated Ptolemy V at the Battle of Panias and captured the city of Sidon, which is the city that's, capture, well-fortified city in the text. That city was Sidon. Sidon is in modern-day Lebanon. And the whole point now here in this particular thing is Antiochus and the Seleucid Empire would now control the Promised Land from here on. Okay, that's an important thing. It really sets the stage for Antiochus the Great's successor, who was Antiochus Epiphanes, the despicable one. Okay, remember, he was the little horn of chapter 8, not chapter 7, chapter 8. He's the little horn of chapter 8, the despicable person that's going to come and wreak havoc on the land of Israel, which he did do that. Okay? All right. 17, he will set his face to come with the power of his whole kingdom, bringing with him a proposal of peace, which he put into effect. He will also give him the daughter of women to ruin it. That's an interesting phrase, but she will not take a stand for him or be on his side. This is very interesting in history. After these battles, Antiochus, I guess, lost his taste for going to war with Egypt. So his solution was to form a peace treaty, and so he offered his daughter Cleopatra. Okay, not the Cleopatra that Elizabeth Taylor played in the movie. That Cleopatra was in the Roman era, like 50 BC or so. This is different Cleopatra, Egyptian or Persian in that time, Greek Empire. His solution, Antiochus, was to offer his daughter Cleopatra to King Ptolemy V. Now he was 10 years old. Okay, he wasn't 4 years old. He was 10 years old. And that a marriage happened about 4 or 5 years later. He gave him his daughter, Cleopatra. But apparently, what we know from history, Antiochus really gave that daughter with some unscrupulous means. He was assuming that Cleopatra would work on his behalf, kind of in the Egyptian government, to kind of wreak havoc there, so that eventually he could come in and control even that territory as well. Unfortunately, Cleopatra never went along with her father's wishes. She actually loved her husband and never supported her father's scheme to do any of that stuff. And history records that, and so does the prediction that Daniel gave. Okay, 18 and 19. Then he will return his face to the coastlands and capture many, but a commander will put a stop to his scorn against him. Moreover, he will repay him for his scorn. So he will turn his face towards the fortresses of his own land, but he will stumble and fall and be no more. Okay, this again is still talking about Antiochus the Great, Antiochus the Third. And one of the interesting things that happened late in his career, though he lost the taste for battling with the Egyptians in the southern kingdom, he was okay with trying to, extend his empire to the west. And so he had lots of campaigns against the rising Roman Empire. It was not an empire at the time, but they were certainly, the rising stars to come that would eventually defeat the Greek Empire at a later time. So Rome was basically against Antiochus's expansion into Europe. He attacked lots of territories in Asia Minor and in Europe, and the Romans kind of beat him back and thwarted his conquestial desires there in the West. And eventually Antiochus the Great abandoned that, and he just came home and returned to Syria, okay, and eventually died. And then last verse in this section, another very interesting. Then in his place one will arise who will send an oppressor through the jewel of his kingdom, yet within a few days he will be shattered, though not in anger nor in battle. Okay? What happened? Antiochus the Great, Antiochus the Third, eventually died, and his son, Seleucus the Fourth, took his place. And during his reign, that Roman Empire started rising, and it conquered a lot of the Syrian territory that he held. And as a result of that, the Romans actually laid on him taxes and required, mandatory tributes. And his tribute was 1,000 talents every year. That was quite a lot of money. And this basically forced Seleucus IV to raise taxes on his subjects. And one of the despicable things he did was he went into Jerusalem and raided the temple treasuries of all of the treasure there to help him pay for this. And shortly after that, he died a mysterious death. Many people and expositors and historians believe that he was poisoned, and many of them think that the next ruler, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, may have had a hand in poisoning Seleucus IV, possibly. Okay, And that really gave rise to the opportunity for him to come in there. So that was the conclusion of verse 20. A lot of historical stuff that has been fulfilled that overlays the text just beautifully. And now you see why it's important, why there's such a battle for the authorship of the book of Daniel. Okay, if the book of Daniel was written in 165, then all of that stuff was already known, and it was just written in prophetic type language, is apocalyptic literature, okay, where the author knows that he's writing, not prophecy, okay? But if Daniel really was written in the 600 and late 500 BC, then this is some of the most accurate and detailed prophetic fulfillment that you've seen anywhere. It rivals the fulfillment of all of the messianic promises that happen for Jesus' first coming, born in Bethlehem, things like that. Now, one of the things that's important to notice is that the fulfillment of this prophecy occurred literally. There were literal historical events that happened that are the fulfillment of these prophecies. So it really, begs the conclusion that we should expect the rest of the text in 21 through 35 that deals with Antiochus, and 36 through the end of the chapter that deals with the future ruler to come during the end times. We expect that those should be fulfilled literally as well. Okay, there's nothing to suggest that. So again, here's our timeline of Daniel chapter 11. Kind of the first part up there is the first 3 verses, all the way to the splitting of Alexander's empire. And then I've tried to separate King of the North, King of the South, their battles. And you can see that during the green arrow, that's the time when the southern kingdom dominated Israel. They dominated the control. But at point number 2, 197, under Antiochus the Great, Syria, the northern kingdom, finally takes permanent possession of Israel, and they hold it from then on out. And that really is one of the catalysts that allowed Antiochus Epiphanes now to do all of the dastardly things he did in Israel during those times. So next week we're going to look at his campaigns. It'll just be limited to verses 21 through 35, and then when we come back on the 10th, we'll first cover why is it that starting in verse 36, we think that we're not talking about Antiochus Epiphanes anymore. We're talking about someone else. And this is a future king that's coming that we in the New Testament, again, not knowing anything about Revelation or the Gospels, we'll jump ahead and say this concerns the Antichrist, but we'll use the terminology of Daniel. Okay, the willful king is what he's called here in Daniel chapter 11. Again, I've written down these references here, Walvoord, Showers, Miller. There's also one other good website, if any of you have ever spent any time up on Precept Austin, kind of is a website where you can do verse by verse, and it will give you a hodgepodge of expositors. Okay, it'll, here's a verse, it'll print the text, and then pages and pages of commentary from different expositors over the years. So that can be very helpful, especially in Daniel chapter 11. Really details, again, some of the historical things that went on here. Again, there were certainly some additional kings here and there sprinkled in that are not mentioned. Again, prophecy is selective. And I had to give these notes before I actually got this. I sent the notes off to be copied to Hillary, And then the dog starts barking, and this commentary lands on my book step after I sent the notes. So Leon J. Wood would, a commentary on Daniel would be another commentary that would go nicely with this for those that want to study this more detail. It really is fascinating. Like I said, early in my Christian conversion, the study of Daniel was the thing that convinced me that the Bible is inspired. And going to Baptist Bible Seminary and learning from Dr. Mike Stallard, probably the one thing that convinces me the most about Daniel is the Imperial Aramaic of Daniel was not in existence in the 160s and 50s. Okay, this is a type of Aramaic that was long forgotten and gone, and there really was no such thing as Palestinian Aramaic that the liberal scholar would say. This was really imperial Aramaic in those Aramaic portions of Daniel, and that was one of the things that, plus all of these fulfillments in history that convinced me that the Bible is true, and is it inspired, and it's nothing for God to dictate the events that are going to happen in the future. And thus he gave us the book of Revelation and things like that we're still waiting for some of the fulfillment. So, all right, I know that was a lot. I had to skim that just to fit it in the time. We literally could have spent 3 months going through just exhaustive detail, almost year by year, through this text of Daniel chapter 11. But that's an exhausting task. So you can get that if you want it in some of these commentaries and piece it together. I know it would be a lot of work, but I think it's probably worth doing. And so we'll leave it at there for today. Any questions or comments? This probably is one of my favorite, maybe chapter 9, but chapter 11 here, this section is probably my favorite section of Daniel because of the dramatic fulfillment of God's word in the prophetic scriptures here. So, all right. No comments, questions, anything? All righty. We will cover the next section in the text, 21 through 35, next week. All righty. Yep.